Today I want to talk a little bit about giving a studio tour, what it means to give an amazing studio tour. Part of your artistic practice is getting people into your studio, right? You want people to visit your studio, you want curators to visit your studio. What happens when the curator gets to your studio? What do you do? There was one story I was told that I think is very important. It was from the curator and critic who is the chief curator at the Guggenheim Museum. And what she told me was something I had asked specifically in an interview. I do interviews for Yale Radio, and this was one of them. She had interviewed, well, she did interview, but she had gone to the studio of Matthew Barney. Matthew Barney, as you know, is this world-famous artist. If you don't know of him, he's had solo shows at the Guggenheim, major artists around the world. And what she did, and I'm talking about Nancy Spector, the chief curator at the Guggenheim, what she did was visit his studio. And he had a reputation for kind of wowing studio visits. And friends of mine used to always ask, what is he doing in there? Why is his studio visit so amazing? So I asked Nancy, exactly how does a studio visit go with Matthew Barney? What happens when you walk in? And what she said was very illuminating, and it's something that you could use in your studio visits. So you come to his studio, take the elevator, whatever it is, and walk in. He's there to greet you. He says, thank you for coming to my studio. Come on in and I'll show you a little bit about my work. The first thing that he brings you to is kind of a desk or a table where he has his computer, where there's some writings, and he has things pinned all over the wall on a corkboard. And there are postcards, maybe little drawings, pictures of people that he admires, pictures of his kids, whatever's there. They're things that are he's looking at all the time. And he tells her, this is where things start. And I'm looking at a lot of different images. I'm looking at not only images of family, of heroes, but I'm also doing these little sketches. And he begins to talk about why he's collecting those images and what he's interested in about those images, right? Maybe we all have those. Postcards of paintings or drawings or things that are posted up. But rather than just jump into the art right away, here's a painting, here's a sculpture, what he does is he talks about the very beginning process. That's not even the art. It's how he's thinking about it. So the curator has a time to kind of relax and get used to the way he's talking. And then after he discusses that a little bit, he moves on. And he says, now in this section I'm working on a drawing, and it's where he's beginning to flesh things out a little bit. And he'll show her maybe a drawing that he's working on, a sketch of something, but it's incomplete. A canvas that's stretched, that isn't primed yet, or perhaps is primed and just is beginning to be worked on. And he talks a little bit about the process, the difference between drawing and painting for him, the difference between drawing, painting, and sculpture. So he's building up a kind of narrative as he walks through. The next thing he takes her to is a small video. He's showing her something that's still a sketch of what he's doing. He makes sculptures primarily, lots of drawings and prints, but also he's known for doing films that incorporate all his sculptures and ideas. So then he shows her a small video that again is a kind of sketch of what he's doing. And in that video, he begins to explain what he's doing. He shows it to her through a video camera or on his computer, but it's essentially a rough sketch of something that's coming. And again, he's tying together the ideas that may have happened in the drawings and canvases, as well as in his computer and on his corkboard. The final step for him is then taking him into the larger studio, which is where he's working on sculptures. Now, before she's even come into his studio, which is usually the first step for most artists, she was in an office-like area where, again, he's thinking, drawing, kind of coming together with concepts of what he's doing. This gave the curator rich information to now understand what's happening in his main studio. And even if you have one studio and it's all a small cubicle, that could be one side of it. It doesn't have to be that you have to have separate rooms. He did have a large studio at this time. So then finally he takes her into that studio, that portion of the studio. There's sculpture in there, there's drawings, there's all kinds of things that he's working on. And now he's coming to fruition with some of this. He's telling her how this sculpture came together and what he's aiming at. Still incomplete, but much more complete than the video, the paintings, or the sketches, or the corkboard he was showing her before that. That's where the studio visit ends up, is him talking about the latest materials he's investigating, the kind of shows he wants to put together. He then waits for her to give him feedback. She begins to talk about now the show and his work, and she can talk about it in the context of some of the ideas he already introduced in the previous talks about what's on his corkboard or what's about to be on his canvases. She understands where he's coming from. This is something you could use in your studio. I think it's an important way to think about looking at your studio and involving people in your studio, because instead of just walking in and looking at paintings, they're walking in and they're led through a process. You're leading them about how to look at work. Finally, when they're in the last section, something that I've recommended before is a time when you can say to them, let's say they're very quiet, they're not used to talking, they're finally looking at your nearly finished work. You can pause, see if they have anything to say. If not, you can say, do you have a favorite in here? Does anything draw your attention more than the other? That's a pretty simple question to ask people. And usually whether they have a great visual literacy or not, they'll say, oh yeah, I like that one. Then walk over to it and talk to them about that one and tell them why it's special. So that's briefly what a studio visit is in terms of Matthew Barney, a major artist, talking to a major curator who gave him a solo show. But that was how he conducted studio visits generally, and is a way that you too could also conduct a studio visit. Thank you for listening to this today. If anybody's interested in talking with me about personal mentoring, which is what I do, I'm a teacher, a writer, an educator, you can use the link in this YouTube video to schedule a time. But I wish you the very best with your career and your studio visits.